This is county advisory boards and managed wildlife budgets. Is Dale Hansen here?
Yeah, he's coming up. Mr. Chairman, before he gets started, I wanted to address some of the issues, follow up on conversations that we had yesterday about the CAB budgets and the board budgets and how they interact. I think I may have not been as clear as I could have. I passed out a handout. It's 3 pages of worksheets. There's little red, yellow columns with red marks on it, and there's some on the back table if anybody in the audience wants to look at it. Essentially, the CABs and the Commission are all paid out of the same budgetary category, Category 11. And yesterday we had a lot of conversations about our ability or lack of ability to augment what is budgeted for FY11. Basically, we cannot exceed the category in total of what was approved by the legislature for FY11 without doing a work program. A work program has to be reviewed by the Executive Budget Office, and depending on dollar amounts, it has to go to the Interim Finance Committee. We can do work programs. That's not unusual. If you look at the spreadsheet, the middle yellow column is the amount that we currently have budgeted for FY10 for the entire category is just short of $64,000. What we have budgeted in FY11, which is what the legislature approved, is $47,000. We already augmented FY10's budget based on the CAB's needs and the board's needs for travel. So we augmented that, and that's not unusual, and I'm prepared to do an augmentation to this category for FY11 as well. The basis where I was expressing concern about augmenting the budget was around out-of-state travel, which is a line item that is highly scrutinized by the Budget Office, by the legislature, and the governor also put out a memo back in February telling agencies to curtail out-of-state travel that wasn't basically essential. So that does not mean that if the Commission incurs more out-of-state travel than was budgeted, that necessarily is balanced off of the CABs. Depending on what the Commission approves today, I will have to do a work program to augment this category. I say justification for doing that for in-state travel for the business of the CABs and the Commission, I don't anticipate that being a problem at all. But, you know, I'm the fiscal guy, so it's my job obviously to make sure we spend as little as possible to meet our mission. And I do have some long-term concerns about our reserve of unobligated license dollars, which pays for all this. But that's kind of a global concern. I just didn't want to leave the impression with the CABs that based on what was decided yesterday, that would be a reason that they would be shorted. That they don't necessarily, you know, we can augment this amount. The $47,000 is not written in stone. We may have to go to interim finance and do justification, but we're prepared to do that, and I just wanted to clarify that.
I had a question on, you also sent out a last page actual board expenditures for 4-year average. Was that, there had to be some carryover on those, right?
Well, not in that. Actually, the second page, which is the long sheet, actually has the history of our expenditures for the boards and the CABs. And in that page, you know, we give the CABs a certain amount of money based on their budget for the year, and they manage to that amount. If they don't spend all that money, we don't take that money back. The county keeps it, and then it's rolled forward to the next year. So when they come back for another budget request, we look at what those balances are and deduct whatever that balance is projected to be from their request. But when you look at this long sheet here, you can see the amounts that they ask is highly variable. Some of them go years without asking any money. Mostly that's because of the balance forward. And I thought that gave a really skewed picture of what they're really spending. So that's why we have this last sheet, which gives you a 4-year average, which is as much records as we could get our hands on quickly. to kind of show you what they're really spending in absolute terms, regardless of balance forward, just so you could get a feel and an idea of how much each cab really spends each year.
Why is the difference between, let's go to the last sheet, the 4-year average, let's say Clark County is $1,400, and if you go to the worksheet now, we have $7,300.
Part of the reason is in the case of Clark County, there was a line item in their request, and I believe it was $2,700.
Yeah, it was $2,700 for a Clark County employee to assist
Yes.
with their record keeping, I think.
We've never been charged for that. They do have an employee that supports them. It's not an unreasonable amount given the amount of support, but we've never been charged an allocation for a county employee.
Is that the only county board that has that, an employee?
A county employee helping them out? I believe so. I believe that's the only request that we had that specifically said county employee.
Some of the others do have an allocation for clerical support, but as far as I know, those are contractors.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, they're all contractors.
Yeah. And the amounts are fairly modest.
That's a
so.
big change.
Yeah, that is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. For the record, my name is Dale Hansen. I'm the Administrative Officer 2 and the Federal Grants Coordinator. Just so the cabs know, I don't know if everyone got it, we did put out a new sheet that has some adjusted numbers on it. So if you didn't get one, you can grab it back there. Plus, this year we went a little bit, we did this a little bit differently. We have 4 different funding options listed there. And so I will take any questions. If you guys want me to explain the options, I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and just walk through them.
All right, we have option number 1, which basically takes the CAB budget request and subtracts out what was reported by the counties as far as their balance. And it also takes into account what we do as far as determining projected costs for the rest of the year. Option number 2 basically takes the total, what we ended up funding them this year for FY10, and it divides that by the option 1 total. So basically we come up with the baseline 31,000 to fund them at for FY11 if we choose to fund them like this year.
Yeah, basically brings them all down to the current year's budget.
And then option number 3 takes option number 1, which basically subtracts, which subtracted out the county reported balances and our projected costs, as well as subtracts out the CAB clerical support. And then option number 4, which we don't recommend, would actually fund them at what they were budgeted at for this biennium.
Which is the base actuals from
it's the
FY08, which was an abnormally low year. One other point that I just would throw in there is that part of the reason that the overall amount of requests are up this year is a lot of, it sort of all happened at once. A lot of counties didn't have really big balances to balance forward, whereas you can see historically sometimes they didn't need funding for a couple of years. So.
And the memo also said that you sent me that about the most expeditious would reduce it 29% without dragging out more staff and committees.
That was the recommendation to reduce it to the current budgeted amount, which would be.
Is that what that is?
Yes. Which option is that? Option 11? Wait a minute.
Have to be option 2.
No, option 2 removes their existing balances. Option. Yeah, it is option 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I would like to note on option 1, that pretty much covers, that would cover all their travel that they requested this year for FY11.
And there wasn't anything unusual about the travel they were requesting. It was, I mean, we looked at it in detail.
We looked at it in detail.
It was all reasonable.
Where were the increases at then?
Part of it is last couple of years we've had increase in our mileage reimbursement, which a lot of people do drive to these events. Also, I just think more people are, they're doing these budget requests supposing that they're going to attend all 8 meetings. And so I think most everyone's starting to do that. I don't think they've always done that in the past. Yeah. And then there is, and I haven't been doing this a long time, there is slight increase in clerical costs and other costs that they're asking us to reimburse them for. And some people also have had increases, small increases in their workman's comp.
Are you looking at the attendance too?
We haven't looked at the attendance. This is my second year, and last year I don't know if we had a record of people's attendance. It was pretty hard to grab, and so we didn't bother to do it this year.
I think that'd be important to look at the attendance because the cabs that show up consistently, I think they're the ones that, should be funded. And if we have some cabs that don't show up, I don't think we ought to fund them to the level they want because we need the participation, and the ones that are consistently here are the ones that, we should put a priority on. That's my opinion. And that's why we do a roll call every time. And we did that a couple of years ago, and then we sort of let it go. But you ought to do a roll call of these and have that when you do these budgets in, so we can see the attendance, the percentage that they attend the meetings. If they attend the meetings, the high percentage, I don't have any problems with funding them. But the ones that don't attend, then I have a problem funding them money. Mm-hmm. Is the Director Mayor? Is a maybe I'll ask the Deputy Director, is the department making budget adjustments within the department based on the governor's order? I mean, you are, aren't you?
Sure.
Reductions?
You want to talk specifically about what reductions that we've had to make?
For out-of-state travel?
For the department?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we made a lot of reductions that were included in the special session. I don't remember the total dollar amounts off the top of my head, but out-of-state travel, we reduced by about $40,000 across the board. We did take a lot of reductions. I don't have that itemized.
But the bottom line is, everyone's taking reductions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
we did not take any reductions in the special session to the commission category. We argued successfully that was, part of the regulatory job of the commission. They got to have travel budget in order to attend the meetings, that sort of thing.
But we didn't increase it.
No.
And there's some increases here.
Yes, yes. And like I said, we will have to do a work program to augment that. The in-state travel piece, I don't think will be a problem. It's the out-of-state that they scrutinize very closely that gives me a little bit of concern.
But option 2 would reduce them to the current level, right, without having to increase.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we would have to do an increase like we did this year.
We would still have to do a work program. They're currently at about $20,000 budgeted for all the cabs. If we brought them to the current year's level, we'd have to increase that up to $31,000, which we did last year. Like I say, the in-state stuff isn't as scrutinized, and we really didn't reduce a lot of in-state even internally.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we, along with all the other agencies, took reduction, in a number of areas. I don't know of any commissions and boards that took significant reductions. But we have the option, of course, with a larger budget to hold positions vacant, to cancel projects, to do those kinds of things in order to accommodate that. In this particular case, we'll have to ask for more money to bring this up. But, I mean, I'm not sure that the option of eliminating a CAB or CAB budget is something from a working government is really a good option. So, I mean, it's a little bit different than what we had to face, frankly.
Commissioner Beth.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at NRS 501.320, which is titled Budgets. It's under the County Advisory Board section of NRS. And in basically what it says is, one, annually, not later than May 1, each board shall prepare a budget for the period ending June 30th of the following year, setting forth in detail its proposed expenditures for carrying out its duties as specified in this title within its county, and submit the budget to the commission accompanied by a statement of previous year's expenditures certified by the county auditor. And then number 2 is that the commission shall examine the budget in conjunction with the director or a person designated by him and may increase, decrease, alter, or amend the budget. Now, my question is, that we're talking about these various options, but the legal requirements for the budget, and I guess this is a question for the DAGs, is there an assumption that we need to fund enough for the county advisory boards to do their function? If that's the legal requirement, which I believe it is, I think that even though the commission can certainly decrease the budget, it can't decrease the budget and put the CAB in a position where it can't perform its function. And so I think that that's the reasonable interpretation when I read this, and I'm curious if the DAGs feel the same, based on that requirement.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but yeah, the requirement is to fund the boards, the county boards, so that they can do their mission. But I guess it's the commission's discretion as to how much they need to do their mission. So I'm not sure what the question is. Is there a question that you're going to zero out one of the budgets?
The question is that we're talking about these various options that aren't really keying in. We're looking at what they did in prior years, and in other words, I think the focus needs to be is what do we need, what do they need to do, what level of funding do they need to be able to perform their function, and so, what they may have done in one year may not necessarily apply in this year. And let me give you an example for Clark County. Clark County had a open meeting law violation filed against them. That open meeting law violation caused the county to put in additional infrastructure requirements of a person to do their accounting and be involved in their agendas and their minutes, and all of this layered on is the reason for the increase that has occurred this year, and Mr. Dixon will get up and explain that in detail. Okay, and so these are requirements that have been placed on them by the county. They're not arbitrarily saying we need more money for just any reason. There are reasons for the need for the additional money. And I just want this commission to focus on what it is that these CABs need to be able to function. That seems to me to be the determining and the legal requirement that we are under. And then within that is our discretion as to what they need.
I was thinking I didn't see anything in there where there's a requirement where they can hire additional people. And I'm not picking on Clark County, but I know a couple other county boards said they want to hire, transcribers. They're very expensive. Washoe County has one, and every county wants to do it because the secretary doesn't want to do the notes. I was secretary of Washoe County, and it's a real tough chore. But if all the counties started hiring somebody, then that's going to be a pretty expenditure.
And follow up to that, I think what we're seeing is that, as everybody knows, counties, just like any other level of government, are feeling the pinch, and so things that they may have done in the past gratuitously, like provide transcription and these kind of services, have taken a real good hard look at their budget and said, you know what, the state should be paying this. The Department of Wildlife for the county advisory board should be paying this. It's right here in the statute. There's their budget requirement. And so they have basically moved, in ways of cutting their budgets, they're now pushing back. Okay, and so those are the kind of things that I think are happening here, and I just want to make sure that whatever decision we make is in compliance with the requirements of NRS, and it seems to me that there is a base level that we need to fund for these CABs to function, to do their travel, to be able to do their minutes and their agendas, and to do everything that is required of them under our NRS statute to deal with the advisory boards, as well as anything that's tangential to that, which includes open meeting law requirements, which include agendas, these things are legally driven. That's why we have an attorney general or a district attorney at our meetings many times, and for the CABs, and that we have a person there recording everything, and then that has to be transcribed into minutes, and those are absolute requirements for their function, and so we need to fund it. That's what I think this statute requires us to do. And so we can talk about, looking at the budget for the prior year and all these other things, but in the bottom line in my mind is that we need to make sure that under the current requirements that these CABs are under, that we fund them for their mission.
I want to listen to the CABs, and I'd like to hear from the CABs have done everything they can to minimize the expenses on their budgets, and like we're only sending one guy to a meeting instead of two and stuff like that. And so we're going to open it up to CABs in a minute, and I want to hear the CABs, and I'd like to hear them. We're doing everything to cut our expenses, whatever possible, because that's what the agency is doing, and that's what the commission, and I sent a letter out to all the committees of the commission, and I can't mandate it, but I sent a letter out to all the committees last year saying, if you find in your heart not to charge the department for the travel time, don't do it. I can't demand it. And so consequently, I think most of our committees and most of our commissioners do not charge the agency for their travel time because of that. And so I'd like to see from the CABs if there's anything they can do to help in this drought area, because everyone's suffering on that. And Commissioner Cabrera.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. The problem, as you pointed out, Mr. Macbeth, is endemic to government, whereby they have to budget every 2 years. Private business, like you and I have been involved with in the past, we can move much faster. We don't have near as much red tape to go through in order to make adjustments to our budget, whether it's out-of-state travel or pencils and pens. So it is kind of frustrating, but I don't think anybody, I haven't heard anything that says that any of us wants to cut out any CAB. I don't think that would happen. I think what we're talking about is probably reducing the cost to match with the fact that others are having to do with less. I don't like the way we budget either. It's the antithesis of what I'm used to budgeting too. But I understand it's government accounting, and so therefore we're stuck with it. It's very hard to anticipate what your expenses are going to be 2 years out. And I think I think that we've all been constrained in the past, even when there was money available, in what we could do. And I think that's a shame, because there are meetings that we should be attending. There are things that should be done, whether it's the CABs or the commission, and that we're not doing right now. And that's to the detriment, I think, of being able to address the issues that we're involved with all the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bennett.
I would just want to respond to that, because I agree, but I think that the issue of the commission and their budget is separate apart from the budget issues that we're dealing with here. And I look at the commission's budget, and I see some real issues there. I think that we should have more of a process in place for our budget, and so we can carry out our duties. And it really bothers me that we can only send one person to a WAFWA event. I really do, because I think those are really great events, and we talked about that yesterday. But anyway, that's one issue.
Separate issue.
This, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I got one quick question for Brian. But because the county is demanding this of the CAB, it would seem to me like the county should pay for it. If that's their request, that there has to be a secretary there, looks like the county would provide it.
Again, that's not really a legal choice, that's a policy choice. The county, it's, the unfunded mandate, you could call it in microcosm, but the county is, I don't know the specific facts in Clark County, but I assume the county is saying, look, in order to stay in compliance with the open meeting law, you have to do this. Now, because the law requires it, does the county have to pay for it? I don't know, an argument could be made, but again, it's a legislative function. It's just like this commission is, if they ask you to pay for something, you have that discretion to decide what you're going to pay for and not going to pay for. So the bottom line is I don't know of a legal way you can force the county to pay for this because they're requiring the CAB to stay in compliance with the open meeting law.
But by the same token, the county looks to me like they're requiring us to pay for it.
Well, sorry. The county's not requiring us to pay for it. They're not forcing us to pay for it, but they're saying the CAB has to have it, and the statute says we're the ones that fund the CABs. So that's where the coercion comes from. The county's not forcing us to pay for it, but they're telling the CAB they have to do this to do their job. So I know it's a fine line, but still, they're not legally forcing us to. They're not forcing you to fund this.
Everything's up to interpretation, isn't it?
Well, that's why I have a job here, you know?
I don't think there's anybody that can't do it less and still get the job done. Okay, I'm going to turn it over. Thanks, Dale. I'm going to turn it over to the cabs to come up.
We had, you want to go by cards?
Go by cards.
All right, I'd like to start with cards stated on this. I believe we had Mr. Dixon, followed by Gil, Yannick? You wanted to be on here, correct?
Dixon first.
What's that, sir?
Mr. Dixon first, followed by Mr. Yannick.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman, Clark County Wildlife Advisory Board. We've had a lot of discussion. I understand the chairman's concerns. I think Commissioner Macbeth summarized some of the things we have. What I would like to do is, under statute, besides the budgetary authority that Commissioner Macbeth read, under NRS 501-303, it says duties, and it says submission of recommendations, attendance of the chairman or other members at commission meetings is the actual topic there. And if you go under 2A of that, it says, shall attend meetings of the commission in which seasons are set or bag limits, which is not all of our meetings. It's clearly not all 8. It says, or other regulations and policies. I come to every meeting because every meeting that we've had since I've been chairman of the Clark County Board has had a regulation or a policy that we've had to deal with here. Therefore, of the 8 out of 8 meetings that you have, you always have one of those things. So by NRS statute, we are required to attend these meetings. If we're required by statute and we're supposed to send in budgetary authority to meet the requirement that's required of us, at a minimum, all of our travel has to be covered. To go to all 8 meetings, unless you can determine early on that you're not going to have meetings where you don't have regulations or policies that you're going to cover, or bag limits. We know what the bag limits ones are. It's the regulations and policies that you determine of whether or not a cab would have to be present at a meeting. Living in southern Nevada, we have to travel to most of the meetings, except for you have 1 or 2 down there a year. And most of the time, we're traveling a long distance to get to the meetings here in northern Nevada, where majority of the sportsmen are and where you have a majority of the active cabs. We have an active cab down there. That costs generally more money. You guys know what it costs for you to head down to Clark County. So when you ask the question, what are we doing for cost savings? I told you yesterday, you brought up the fact that we had to pay for a room out at the shooting park, and we probably shouldn't have had to do that. There are people like myself and other board members who actually cash stuff up out of their own pocket. I currently work for a contractor who is funded by the U.S. government, Department of Energy, and I use a lot of my travel perks and miles and other things to augment my travel here to minimize the cost that it costs for me to do, and that's why I do most of the travel for Clark and not other people, because when other people do it, there's about a 40% increase in the amount of money it costs because I use my hotel, car rental, airplane, all those things that I have out there I use to augment and reduce the budget. So you've asked me what we're doing. I'm doing my best to keep my travel budget at a minimum, knowing that I probably have one of the larger travel budgets having to come from southern Nevada up here to northern Nevada to these meetings.
I'm not saying I know what the statute is and I know responsibilities, and I think it's great. We need your participation. The question I had was just, what can you do and are doing to cut the cost, like every state agency in the state, including the commission here, are you doing as much as you can to cut the expenses that you're charging? And I don't disagree that you have the largest, and so does the Elko. You two have the largest travel budgets are, and you should get reimbursed for the travel. But there's other things there. Are you doing the most you can to cut your costs? And I don't have any complaint with you having to travel to the meetings because you're supposed to. But that's why I said I'd like to see the attendance tied into your budget request, and I think we're going to get that. And if you attend 100% of the meetings, you deserve the travel. Sure you do. But is there anything that you can do to help these guys save money? That's my question.
Well, and then I'll come to the administrative support put on Clark County for the first time in, I don't know, you've been keeping records here, you had it back there for however long you've been keeping. It's the first time we've ever requested that. That is strictly driven, as Commissioner McBeth said, by an open meeting law that was filed against Clark County. There was no findings of fact against us that would have led us to had to do anything, but one of the things that the county committed to the commission, back to the AG's office, is that they would put a permanent stenographer and a permanent basically district attorney onto this, and that they would cover the costs this year, but they would look for partial cost reimbursement of those people for doing their things next year, and that's what you see as the increase in here. But that is a requirement that was put on for having an open meeting law violation filed against us, even though there was nothing substantiated in that against us. It was because of that, Clark County, because of being a large municipal government, wants to cover their bases very strongly so that we, from an advisory board perspective, do not put the county in harm's way. So that was part of the agreement with the Attorney General's office that we would move forward with. So what you're seeing here is reflective of not the full cost of what it is to bear those people, but probably about 20% of their cost for their support time for the amount of time, because right now they're paying them overtime on weekends, and they would put it as part of their permanent job duties to do this, and that would be partially covered here.
Any other questions? Commissioner Capurro?
Thanks, sir. You theoretically, and of course I understand the argument that they can put the requirement on you and let somebody else pay for it, which is us, the state Department of Wildlife. You know, the county boards are, yes, they're named by the commission, but it really is a creature of the state, and particularly the Nevada Department of Wildlife. They don't control your committee. Is there a question as to whether or not they have the right to impose things, even though the only thread that they have that ties it to them is that they name people to a commission it's not the same as an advisory commission for Spanish Springs, as a for instance, which clearly is a creature of the county. The CAB is not a creature of the county. It is a creature of the state, particularly a creature of the Department of Wildlife. And therefore, do they have the right to put that kind of requirement on us or them?
Did they specifically say they have to, you have to use one of their county recorders, or can your secretary do your minutes?
We do not have a secretary in Las Vegas. We have a chairman and a vice chairman. We do not have never had a secretary position, at least during my tenure.
You've never designated one of your members secretary?
We've never designated a member secretary because we always had somebody informally doing things. It now has been formalized because from a records perspective, they wanted very clear audio, and they didn't want us to do verbatim minutes, but they wanted the audio that captured the entire meeting such that when you got an AG investigation of an open meeting law violation, which have been more prevalent for this board as well as the county advisory boards over the last 12 months, it has become something that we've seen a lot more of. They want to make sure that they have the legal standing to present in an area to protect county interests, and so that's why it's, you know, you have different audio recording equipment, and you have somebody there that is, the county says, this person now, i.e. this person, we stand behind that person because they're one of our county employees, they've done it, and they'll stand behind it. I don't think they would stand behind, and I don't know this for a matter of law or fact, it's just a matter of opinion here. They have, by setting that up, they've inferred that they would not accept us doing it ourselves because we put the county in a position where the county wants legal protection.
The open meeting law which is the law of the land, only says you need an audio recording of the meeting. You can take the tape recorder and audio it, and that satisfies the law, if I do believe. We went through that. So that's all you need, and then you need it transcribed.
I understand, but you've went from audio on these meetings to video on these meetings. For what reason?
I didn't want it.
Well, there's a reason. I mean, you tell me, but there's a reason behind that, because you wanted to have more than an audio of what was going on because of some of the things, or is there another reason for that? Darrell, you're shaking your head. I don't know.
It wasn't our
It
decision.
wasn't our decision. But anyway, the open meeting law says you only have to do an audio, and that suffices the law, and that is the law. And so that...
You have to be able to capture the entire audio of the meeting
Yeah.
and the participants, and doing a hand recorder at the front of the room was not sufficient, is what I was told. It had to be something that allowed you to record. I'm not going to go out and invest in a recording device out of my pocket. It's how the county decided to move forward with this, sir.
Okay. Anybody, any other questions?
Thank you.
We had Gil Yannick, followed by Tom Casanelli.
For the record, Gil Yannick, Carson Advisory Board. Little history. When we decided to rewrite the CAB manual to give some foundation, because there was turnover in a bunch of the cabs and procedures and things were being lost, we spent a lot of time determining and providing the cabs with information on how to prepare their budgets. Those of us who have been around a long time, a lot of times these budgets were produced on the back of a brown paper bag. Sometimes they weren't even submitted. Gas was cheap. People didn't really care too much. If you look back over the last 4 or 5 years, gas has climbed up and expenses have moved up for everybody. And so when we came to the section of giving people instructions on how to prepare the budget, it was very interesting. The workshops were full. People asked a lot of questions. I provided a lot of cabs with software to generate, a budget so that when they came to the department, there was some consistency in how people prepared their budget. And I think that caused people to realize, what does it really cost to attend the meetings and to operate a cab in each of the counties? So we've been providing software to be able to give all the cabs to be able to put a spreadsheet together so that they can understand it, their members can understand it, and when it comes to the department, there's some consistency in the way people account for their expenditures. I even gave the cabs, if they wanted it, a spreadsheet for an expense account to be completed by each of their members when they attended a meeting, so they could come up with what does it really cost to come to one of these meetings. Now, the single biggest variable in putting together the budget is where the meetings are going to be. And unfortunately, when it comes time, like in February, when we get the request to generate the budgets, we don't know where the meetings are going to be next year. That decision, or that determination isn't made till the latter part of the calendar year, unfortunately. So, but again, through experience, we know there's going to be so many meetings in Reno, so many meetings in Las Vegas. It's going to be Elko or Ely, and then it could be Winnemucca, or it could be Eureka or Tonopah. We have a pretty good idea for those of us who have been doing this for a long time. But it is a variable, and as Mr. Dixon mentioned, when you look at the GSA schedule, which we use for our per diem and our mileage and our maximum hotel rates, those are the governing things that we have to live with. So depending on where they're going to be and where you decide to choose those 4 unknown meetings that you have to really basically guess at where they're going to be, you put together a pretty good, pretty close approximation to really what it's going to cost you. Now, the issue with what does it cost the county in addition to the workman's comp, open meeting law says we have to have recording of it. So a lot of counties never had that. A lot of counties had to go out and provide that to their advisory boards. I'm not sure everybody really has one of those. Some of them have some really cheap tape recorders, but they need to have a means of doing that, and we've informed everybody about that. As far as transcribing the minutes, that's not an easy thing to do unless you've done it. And to try to make one of the CAB members the secretary who does the transcription, guys, it's not going to work. The quality of what you're going to get, it's garbage in and garbage out. It's just not going to be worthwhile anything. So yes, there's an expense, and as was mentioned, yes, a lot of the counties realize, hey, you know, we're supporting this advisory board that's mandated by the state. Doesn't help us too much, but these people come in, they volunteer their time, and the governor says we have to have one of these, and we're going to have one of these. And as a result, the agenda gets posted, you know, 3 days before, at least 3 business days before the meeting. Somebody has to put together an agenda based on what we get from the department. That's time consuming. They have to be there at the meeting because there's always issues about open meeting law. Can we do this? Are we doing it the right way? So we're very lucky in Carson City that the recording secretary is provided by the city clerk's office. And those people are the same individuals that take the meeting minutes at all the city advisory meetings. So they're really on top of open meeting laws, and they prevent us from really getting into trouble. They do an excellent job at transcribing the minutes. And we'd be at a great loss without their assistance. So far, Carson City, because they have to do it for all their other advisory boards, they kind of let us slide into it, and I haven't heard anything about them coming back to us, you know, trying to bill us. So we're probably much luckier than some of the other counties that don't have those provisions. The other thing that I want to take issue with is the way the augmentation is determined. It's totally obsolete. It does not take into account what's really happening. And I appreciate Dale spending some amount of time with me to explain how it's done, because I couldn't, when I looked at our first augmentation, I said, that can't be. It's way too little. And so once we heard what way it's done, it's antiquated. It doesn't take into account what expenditures the various cabs are going to have. You ask each county to provide you with a balance in our checking account, so to say, in February. Well, we still have 3 more meetings to the year. So taking a look at what our February balance is, you get a distorted picture of what it's going to be at the end of the fiscal year. So the only way I say, well, listen, you ask us to put together a budget of what we're going to spend, so you could see what the last 3 meetings are going to cost us. So take that money, the number they give you in February, subtract what our expenditures are going to be, then you determine what the augmentation is based on what the budget submittal we put in for the following fiscal year. Well, you haven't been doing that. You take February, you see what the budget is, you subtract 1, and you get a totally wrong picture of what's going to be left in the balance of the account come the end of the fiscal year. You're off by the cost of 3 meetings. And if you look at the meetings we have coming up, we have a very expensive trip to Ely, which you have to drive. That meeting is going to cost $700, $800 to send somebody from the east side of the state. You got another meeting in Reno, and 1 more meeting. So, you know, you've got, in our case, almost $1,600 of expenditures that weren't accounted for if you took the numbers in February. Dale understood what the situation was and revised the augmentation based on what the facts are really going to be. And so I think that he's proceeding by what the state regulations tell him to do. Well, somebody needs to go in there and say, you know, that's wrong. Everybody's got computers nowadays. Everybody submits, I hope they submit on, timely expense accounts to their county, who is the paymaster, so that you can take what they provide you in February, take the budgets that's provided by the various counties, add in that amount, and then you'll come up with a real, true indication of what their budgets are going to have left at the end of the fiscal year. So when you come to augmenting what they will need based on their budget submittals, you'll have a very, very close number.
Gil, you're absolutely right. I assumed that's what they were doing, but are they doing it now?
I can't answer for the department, sir.
I mean, that's A minus B equals C.
I can't answer the question. That's a discussion that I think Dale can answer better than I can answer.
Dale?
Yeah, we do take it into account. But again, it's hard to tell when you get an expense account from the counties, which are they, does this include the Las Vegas trip? Does this include, has that person turned in all their receipts for all their trips and so forth? And Gil is correct. I mean, I think nowadays with computers and so forth, I mean, I could actually, I prefer not getting a county expense report from February. Prefer getting one mid-April and a little more detail from the counties on that. I think that would help me, because it is a guess that there is that variable of what exactly is in that county balance that they're talking about. So we have tried to do it the best we can the last 2 years, but yeah, it needs to be improved, that process.
Some of the counties are better than others, but if you just have to ask them for the projected, where our meeting's going to be, and ask them what their projected cost going to be till the end of the year, and that should be, they should be budgeted for that. You don't want to take that out. It seems simple, but I know there's a lot of county boards that don't submit it. And I don't know if there's some way that with Gil's spreadsheet, if you could work with them and say, let's send this out and make it universal for all the cabs. It sounds like, he's very good at this finances, and he's got some real good ideas, and maybe, Gil, you could work with Dale and say, this is a form we want to all the county boards, and make it an official form so we can all on the same wavelength, and one county board isn't doing this and one county board is not, because it's obvious that you can't budget in February when you got 3 meetings left. You got to take those into account and subtract that out of your budget, and or you got to add that in, because those are expenses, but maybe, Gil, you could do that, and with the spreadsheet, and the problem is you just get one county advisory board to understand it, and then they appoint somebody else that doesn't understand it, and it keeps, and then it doesn't get passed on from one county board to the next, and that's one of the biggest problems, because we got a lot of new county board members, and they have no idea what the budget is. When I was on Washoe County, well, a couple of years with Fred Church, we went over the budget, knew how to do it, but then who knows if the new people know how to do it, and maybe we could get a standard form. If you're going to do it in February, then let Gil help you on it and get it out to all the county boards, and then it just passes over and over with your spreadsheet on it. I think that'd be, what do you think, Director Mayor?
I think that there's some good ideas here. I think all the cabs would be willing to improve processes and make things more efficient, so I think.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with it, because I'm always, the last 2 years, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the numbers I present. We have shorted people a couple of times just because we made a wrong guess.
Yeah, we ought to try to get on the same wavelength, so we had all the cabs happy. So we don't want to short them. We can't short them, and if it's just a logistical thing like this, Gil might have a solution on it. He's been around enough when they wrote the CAB manual, but a lot of the CAB members haven't been around that long with new members, and they probably haven't seen the CAB manual.
Yeah, and from the department's perspective, the cabs are absolutely quintessential. That's our connection to just the sportsman out there buying tags. That's where all that information comes through, and it's a central focus for us to know whether we're doing a good thing or not such a good thing, or So whatever we need to do to make sure that people have adequate funds to do the work we need to get done, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Each cab, when, like Elko, if they know they have two meetings, and one's in Elko, one's in Las Vegas, I mean, they could project their expenses pretty accurately for the next 2 months to give to you on a spreadsheet and say, these are the expenses we need, so, don't cut us off in February, add these expenses on, and they should know, because we got our schedule out there, and each cab will know projected till the end of fiscal year, whenever you make it, they could project it on a piece of paper for you, and then you'd have something to go by. It seemed like it'd be, I don't want to say relatively easy, but it'd be at least something where we get on the same wavelength, so.
Yeah, I think we can do it with email and faxes and stuff like that. I think it would be a pretty easy process.
Gil,
to
would you be committed to working with this? Because you're really sharp on numbers.
There's a use for an old CPA guy.
I got my Brian Stockton to make comment.
Okay, for the record, Brian Stockton. We talked a little bit, their question was asked about whether the county boards are part of the counties or part of the states, and I just kind of looking at the statute, and obviously this isn't a definitive legal opinion that I've researched for a long time, but the statute under 501-260, it creates the county advisory board to manage wildlife in each of the several counties. And then if you go down further, the board members are appointed by the county commissioners, and the fund, to fund them, the advisory fund is established in the counties. So I mean, my interpretation of that is the legislature intended these to be county bodies and not state bodies, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Capurro.
what chapter was that?
501, and it's 260 is where they're created in the counties.
And that's a wildlife chapter, right?
Indeed it is, yes.
So maybe the county's out of funding.
501, 265. Well, but then the budget one requires the department or the commission to fund them. See, 501, 320 requires the commission to fund them. But you give the money to the county, and the county puts it in a walled-off account. And then there's even a statute that requires the county treasurer to not spend it on anything except the county advisory board. So.
Okay. Thanks, Dale.
We had Tom Casanelli, followed by Rick Smith.
For the record, Tom Castanelli for Humboldt County. Our budget's pretty simple. I mean, we're one of the toughest counties with the exclusion of ALCO being for travel distance from the meetings. So we form our budget basically around our travel costs. We don't have any secretarial. We do that within house, and as Suzanne can see from some of the quality, there is a quality problem when you're trying to run a meeting, sit in a meeting, and take minutes and get them out the next day. We have our meetings late because we don't get our support material till late. It's hard to have these meetings any earlier, and that creates a problem. There's no doubt. I can see some of these bigger counties and where they're coming from, but Humboldt County, like I said, has a simple budget, and it's all around travel. There is a problem with the 3 months or the 3 meetings that we run into. We budget, our budget's what it's going to take for the year. You take that money away that's sitting in the account now that's going to cover the 3 meetings that are coming up. Why do we budget for those 3 meetings? So it's just not budget for them in the meeting before. Each year you budget for the following year, and we know how many meetings, real simple. We have members. What we've done to cut, our members are mostly voluntary. We travel, some of us travel 80 to 100 miles to county meetings. We don't charge any of that. We do all our own printing, calls. We don't charge any of that. I mean, we just figure it as part of our obligations as volunteers. Pretty simple. What we put down for a budget is what the state recommends you put down for travel. If we don't get that, or you cut it down, we're going to have to cut meetings out, or miss some of the less important meetings, and we've done that in the past, where we just said, okay, we can cut this meeting out, and be able to make the important meetings. There's one other. Other than that, that's where Humboldt County sits, pretty cut and dry. Travel
I'm
expense.
glad that you brought that 3-month deal up, and I think when Gil brought that up, I think we know the problem, and they'll be working with Dale and Gil on that and help you out on that, so you won't have that 3-meeting problem, you know, that's, it's been identified, and I'm sure Gil will help solve it, you know, so you won't have to go through that. That's really something.
To the credit of the department, they have worked on this. Each year it gets a little better, and they recognize that. So, you know, if you look at some of these, like 3 and 1, they've taken that into account. I'm almost sure to get those numbers in those 2 options. I imagine number 2, that's probably the reason for the. What is the reason on number 2 option that it's so much lower? Is that because of the money sitting in the accounts being taken out?
Well, the number 2 option gets us to what we work program for the current year. And yeah, most of the variation is simply a factor of how much money the county has currently for rollover, or what we estimate it to be.
That was my understanding. That's why number 2 is so much lower, because you're not accounting for the 3 meetings that are coming up, or a good chunk of it is out of that.
Well, I think
Actually, number.
Dale, if you're gonna, come on up, that was just to reduce it to the current.
Yeah,
amount,
actually,
wasn't it?
number 2 just takes a factor and takes the, what you guys requested minus the balance, the 45,000, and just takes it down by a factor of 0.7. So it meets this year's baseline. What we gave you guys this year was $31,803, so we wanted to reduce your request down.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
if I may just add one comment. You know, this is obviously my first year and Dale's second year doing this, and I think one of the things that we recognize is that we definitely need a standard form and process to do it, so everybody's doing the same thing, and Carson City does a particularly very good job. But the other thing I think, short of changing the statute, I think that one thing that we should look at doing is having a second look at their budgets, maybe in the fall after the fiscal year has begun, so that we know really what balance they had at the end of the year, and then we'll know exactly all the meetings for that fiscal year, and we could kind of true it up. And if we had to come back to the CAB, do a little, or to the commission, and do some adjustments to that, I think that would be a time to make sure we dialed it in so they got enough money for the year.
Who do I have next?
We had Rick Smith, and that was the last card I had for this item.
Rick Smith, Washoe Cab. Budgets, don't you love them? If anybody's done budgets for much period of time, they're never any fun. I'd like to bring up, I've got a number of points I'd like to make. And a couple things, you know, just to bring up, you know, wouldn't it have been nice if you guys had known for your WAFWA that, you know, that 2 years ago it was going to be in Alaska, and that you could have budgeted for that, so it would have been able to send 2 people. You don't know, it's hard to budget for that kind of thing. I've been doing budgets for quite a few years, and I had a number of conversations with Patrick and Dale this year on what information was submitted. And the first information, you know, the list, all that came out is what money was given to the cabs. It didn't say how much they spent. You guys had no information on how much was spent. And then this latest one was brought out, and I think it's a damn good shot at it, but I got to be honest with you, it still doesn't match, because our numbers, and I went through every single receipt and every single for 4 years, and I can tell you Washoe County's numbers don't match what's posted here. And I've got all the documentation to support it.
Just to clarify, are you talking about the last sheet on this handout?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I am.
Thank you.
Participation. I agree with you, Chairman, 100%. The whole point of this is that the cabs participate. And I think you'll see with Washoe County, And I've gone back, like I said, 4 or 5 years. We've attended every single meeting wherever it is in the state. Not only that, we have recently, as you well know, assigned all of our committee to the subcommittees. And I think you guys can see we're attending the subcommittees either by teleconference or in person. And that's not cheap. I mean, you'd have to take time off to do it in your day, work days. They're mostly work days, they're not weekends. So we're making I think Washoe County's making a real effort to show the participation. When I submitted my budget, and I think Patrick and Dale can vouch for this, I gave them a detailed spreadsheet of exactly every penny we spent where, what date, to who. I mean, there's no question of where that money, it's a very detailed accounting, and I think, a lot of the cabs do the same, and some of them have a little, they just probably don't have the means to do that. Recording secretaries, I'd love to bring that one up. It's great because I think Washoe County was the first one to have a recording secretary. Little bit of information, that recording secretary was started in 1999 at Washoe County. This is the 12th year. Happens 1999, Chairman Lent was a secretary on that committee. Fred Church was the chairman. That tells me Chairman Lent was the one that implemented having a recording secretary. And my understanding was you were having open meeting law complaints and you were having disagreements about what the minutes stated. That's why you implemented it. I think it was a great idea, and it's historically it's shown to be a good thing. You look at Washoe County's minutes and you guys tell me, I think they're one of the best minutes that you guys ever see from all the cabs. I've read some of the cabs, and I'm not belittling anybody because I know they have limited means, but I can tell you, I read one this last week. It would be a huge open meeting law. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So I think recording secretaries are essential. Our recording secretary, it's been the same guy for 12 years. Does a great job. He supplies all his own equipment, doesn't charge us for the equipment. He charges us to set up the agenda items, information. He charges us from the time we hit the gavel to the time we close the gavel. He does not charge us for all the stuff of transcribing it in. It's all part of the cost. Now, say he doesn't charge it, it's part of his hourly rate. So, but it's important to do that. I looked at this budget and this one that just came out today is new to us, but I got to tell you, if you really want to get better at what the budgets are, just like you said, number one, you can't do it in February. Number two, you really need to give us the next year's schedule of meetings for that whole fiscal year. If we had that, which we don't, then we would know exactly where we're going, and I can tell you that we could put a pretty good cost. Mine, when I submit my budget and my expenditure from last year, the last 3 meetings I showed were estimated. This is where it's going to be. This is the estimation of what we figure it's going to cost us for those next 3 meetings. We're not, it's very, in my opinion, it's very accurate. Washoe County has asked for a total of $4,847 for the next budget, okay? This year, to date, we have spent $3,200, $3,199.29 to be exact, okay? With an anticipated, and I just updated this after our meeting Monday, our expenditure for the year I anticipate is going to total $4,004.49. Okay? Pardon? Just about.
With 4 cents.
So you might say, well, why are you anticipating $4,847 next year? Well, cost of living is going to go up a little bit. It's a legislative year. I have to factor for the unknown if there has to be a special meeting, and if it is worst case scenario in Elko or Ely or somewhere far away, that's going to cost me $600 to $800 for our budget. So I'm factoring the worst-case scenario, so I don't have to come back and ask for more money. This report that you guys have, if you even consider budgeting option 2 on down, you're going to short every cab. We're not going to be able to do our job. Option 1, I'll tell you, could we get away with it? I can only speak for Washoe County. We probably can live with it, but I can tell you there's going to be no room for error. Because I estimated, I think I said at my meeting the other day, I estimated our cost, bare bones, next year, let me back up. I went the last 4-year average, including this year, 3 years back of what our average. $3,660, I believe, is what I said at our meeting. Option 1, I think, is $3,700 and change, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
$37.77.
Okay, so I got $100 left over. I don't know how much closer you can try and cut a budget than that. So, I appreciate you guys listening to me. I appreciate that you're making the effort, but understand as the cabs, we're working hard trying to do our jobs. And, are we doing things to try and cut down? You bet. Our meeting, we talked about some things we can try and look at to even cut some more costs. Printing, I do all printing myself. I don't charge for any of that. Mailing, do it all myself at my own cost. These guys go to all these other subcommittee meetings. They don't take time off of work. We don't put any cost for those meetings. I'm not going to say there's nothing else we can do, but I think we're really, really trying to do our best to limit our costs. And I would really ask you to fund it fully. But if you can't see it, do that. Please don't go any further than option 1, because anything beyond option 1, you're just cutting us short, and we're not going to be able to perform our function. Thank you.
Rick,
Yes, sir.
how much did you spend last year for recording secretary dollar amount?
Glad you asked that, Jerry. Last year, I spent $1,755. The year before, I spent $2,011.20. The year before that, I spent $1,782.05. And I think in my budget, I have $2,060. So I think that's pretty much right in line with historical data of what we're spending.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that's excessive, but some of these counties, they come up with 3,000 or something like that. I wonder if we could get done cheaper, And I think Bob does an excellent job for Washoe County, and he hadn't asked for a pay raise in 4 years, and does an excellent job, And you could hire somebody from the county that could digitize it and put it on the internet that night, but I don't know if we need that services.
Right. Well, and I applaud you for hiring him in the first place, Chairman Lent. So thank you for that.
He's a good asset for.
He absolutely is a wonderful
counties.
asset.
The big counties have big meetings, absolutely.
And not only that, he's not just a recording secretary, he's a legal secretary. So he is very good at keeping us, you can't do this, can't do that, you have to stay in line, this is open meeting law. And I think he does a great job, so.
Any questions, Rick? Okay, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Got mine as needed. My name's Candido Mendy, and I'm representing Elko CAB. I'm not going to talk numbers because I will tell you the first flaw in the system. The information goes to the chairman. I'm the vice chair. I don't know the numbers. So, but I'm here to fill in and show up for Elko County, so I don't know the numbers. So that's one of the first flaws, is the information goes to the chairman. So if he happens not to be here, we're kind of SOL there. One of the reasons that it's not higher is because we pay for a lot of it ourselves. Like many of these other gentlemen, pay for all the printing. The last meeting, I wasn't sure how it was done, so I just paid for all the papers, because the guys show up, they're not prepared, they haven't been on the internet, so they want you to hand them something so that they know what's going on. So you print it yourself, and you pay for it yourself. So the reason some of these numbers might be low, this is probably my 6th, 7th, maybe my 8th meeting out of Elko. I've turned in an expense once. The rest of it I've just donated. Now, if you get somebody that comes along later that wants to turn in his expenses, you're going to find that those numbers go up legitimately. I've chosen not to. I volunteered for this. Every year, if you have a turnover in the chair, you've just lost that stability on doing the budget. And I believe 2 years ago when we were in Winnemucca for that training, that was the first time we got this book, and you can tell by how dog-eared it is. I pack it with me all the time. And we learned how to do the budget, but I think we could go a step farther by putting something together with NDOW to where they could ship out a packet to the new chair and say, here's what we really want from you. Because there's a chance I'll be chair next year, and I really don't have a clue. So we use the county facilities. They're real good about it. We use the new courthouse in Elko, and it's really a lot nicer and stuff, and there's some recording stuff in there. I think there's a young lady, and if I've heard she gets paid $100 a month to take our minutes. When you're in the middle of a meeting and you're as emotional as I can get, you're not going to write something down. You're too busy thinking about the thing that's going on. And if you're the secretary, you get back and you can't even read your notes. To have an independent third party there is a lifesaver. And just like you people have 2 attorneys here, I've been going to county game board meetings for years and years. I have yet to see an attorney representing the county at one of our meetings. We have we are always questioning ourselves if we're breaking open meeting laws. We showed up one time in Winnemucca at a meeting, and there was all 5 of us from the board there, and we sat in every corner of the building for fear that we might be breaking some law. You know? This is the sort of stuff that we are volunteers that we go through. We're not lawyers, we're not doctors, I'm an auto mechanic. You know, to fact that I don't know what Nevada open meeting laws, I did work for the city for a number of years, so I kind of got some idea of what you could and couldn't do. That's why I suggested we sit in the 4 corners that day so that we couldn't be held accountable for an open meeting law because we had a quorum. The other guys didn't even know that. So, you know, and we are exposed to those same laws that you people are. Clark County, they're bigger, somebody got them. There's no reason that some new guy shows up at a meeting in Elko and doesn't hammer us for the same reason. We're exposed to the same laws you guys are. So the fact that 10 years ago Washoe County got a secretary in, ours has only been there a couple years. Some of these smaller counties, I've seen some of the minutes they send in. I try to read them to get a good idea what's going on. They're 1 page, you know. It's a different level with the knowledge that you have. That's why I think NDOW could put something together to help us out. But like I said, and everybody mentioned that Elko is far away to come to a meeting. You know, it's just as far for us to go this way, and we do it every time. It's either it's either Reno or Vegas. So 7 out of our 8 meetings a year are far for us. So that's all I got to say. Any questions?
Yeah, you know, and for all the county boards, you know, the open meeting law, the Attorney General has somebody, and if you question them, they're on a schedule. They have somebody that goes around to all the boards, and you could ask with the Attorney General's office to get somebody to explain open meeting law. Usually it's your district attorney, but somebody from Georgeville, I think he's always willing to come around to any county. All you got to do is call them up. And
I've never seen
schedule them, and I think it's very important to have that because you have a turnover on boards, and it's a real refreshing. The Board of Agriculture, they had the Attorney General there talking to the board on open meeting, and they have this service available, and the county board should take advantage of it, and you should do it, you know, maybe on an annual basis or whenever you get new members, because it's really refreshing because you guys have the same laws to abide by, and it's really nice to have somebody from the Attorney General's office speaking on the open meeting.
I totally agree.
You can request it.
And from my standpoint, the way I look at it, without looking at all the stuff, we are representing a state board. The county is there because at the county level, they pick the people. At the county level, they watch the money. But other than that, we are representing a state board. And so to ask the county to do any more than that and stick their neck out any farther than that, they'd be stupid to really do it. I mean, we are a state board. The only reason that that the county's involved is to pick the local people and to watch the money. And other than that, we're a state board, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Bob Cook. I'm with Douglas CAB. And I just want to bring a couple of points up. Some of it's, I'll try to make it quick. I just want to let you know that that Douglas County, as far as the agenda items go, and you have a meeting in Las Vegas or something along that line, and we feel that it's something that really doesn't pertain to Douglas County, then we try to save the money and not take that trip. And it's not that we don't want to go to Vegas, it's that we really look at the expense as opposed to the benefit if we do go. And so we do everything we can as far as traveling expenses go to try and save the money. As far as the open meeting law goes, I personally have been through 5 presentations in about the last 4 months. We just had one on Monday with one of my boards, and on Tuesday with our wildlife board. And district attorney told us that, you know, they're targeting all the small boards, even the cabs, you know, all throughout the state. And the next thing that's going to come up is the Commission on Ethics. So if I would urge any of the cabs, if they haven't had a presentation on the open meeting law, to get one, and that they really need to go through an ethics presentation also, because email and, you know, well, you know how it is. Just any communication you have, they're looking at everything, and it's really easy to create a violation these days, thinking that you're perfectly in line with the law and you're not. So the more information you can get, the better, and I would urge all the cabs to do that. As far as the background information goes, I asked you guys to send it to me because I can't afford to print all this out every month. And according to the open meeting law, we have to furnish this to all the members of the public when the public attends our meetings. That's our job. You don't send that to us, so Douglas County takes that expense and they print this out for everybody when they attend our meetings. And that's part of our job as a board to furnish it to the public, and that's another expense that you're not paying for. The county is paying for that. Our board secretary, I think it's really important, just like everybody else, including yourself. It's important to have a secretary that knows what her job is, to record it also, to get the minutes out, and to print the agendas, and to do it right and according to the law. And our secretary gets $22 an hour, and I think I don't really know exactly what our expenses are, but I think it's under $500 a year, and it's worth it to keep us within the law and to get it done right and to get the minutes and the agendas and everything to you as quickly as we can. As far as your budget goes, you have a fiscal budget. If you can do a fiscal calendar, maybe a month before you're asking us to do your budget, that might be an answer. You put out the budget or the calendar in March and ask us to give you a budget in April, it might be something that could be doable for everybody. So I agree with what everybody else has said as far as the fiscal budget, fiscal calendar goes. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Miller, White Pine County. I don't want to be redundant of what all the other cabs have said. I think we're all on the same page. We have the same concerns and same issues. Legally, it takes 5.5 hours from Ely to Reno. It is quite a distance, and I try to do that as often as I can. Fortunately, I have places to stay that save our cab dollars, so those lodging expenses for some of the places that we do have meetings, I try to attend, I try to stay with either friends or relatives to do so, and I'm sure a lot of these people in this room do the same. One thing I would like for you guys to take a look at, and it came up to me when I was putting my budget together, was workman's compensation. I don't think we're clear on workman's compensation, who is liable for the workman's compensation, whether it is the state or it is the county. The county told me that if you were an advisory board member, from the time that you leave your door until the time that you come back, you're covered under the county's workman's comp. And so why were we requesting another $486 for workman's compensation? If this is true that we're automatically covered under each county, there's a lot of savings from each one of these cabs under that workman's comp line item. So there's, I want to say, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in savings in this budget. I think that's something we need to take a look at or have clearly answered.
I don't know. That's something we should look at.
For the record, Patrick, workman comp is an outstanding issue, and I think we've noted that. We need to figure out what the rule is. Some counties, and correct me, Dale, if I'm wrong, some counties we don't pay any workers' comp. Most of them we pay it on one member, and some we pay it on multiple members. And exactly who's liable, you're absolutely right. That's something we need to figure out. It has not been consistent.
Patrick's real good at that, and I'm sure he'll get a handle on it for us.
Well, it'll help us in the future. We won't have all these arguments if we're going to save that kind of money.
Yeah. Commissioner Macbeth?
We might want to ask Gil to come up and speak on the workman's comp issue. I know that he's got experience with it and has kind of vetted that issue. And so if you want to hear that now, I'm sure that he'll be able to.
How long?
3-4 minutes?
Sure. Come on.
25.
Thanks, Bill.
For the record, Gil Yannick, Carson Advisory Board. A year ago, when I was on the Finance Committee, this issue came up, budgets, and because one of the counties came in with a workman's comp cost of $600 or $700, and it was based on their experience factor, because that particular county employees must have had a lot of accidents, claims, whatever, so their experience factor went up. And we started seeing that, how are the counties being charged? Some counties, it turns out that the county is absorbing it, and the county and the budgets should not reflect anything. Some are using the rates that you guys put out as the guideline, and that's acceptable. So there was what we did find, there was nothing but inconsistencies in the way the numbers were being calculated, because each county's rate was different than the other counties. So the mean rate that you come up with is close. But you have to go back to each county to see if they're actually charging the CAB budget and taking that money out of the funds that the state deposits in their holding. So, to make a very long story short, we found it was just almost impossible to get consistency, because just about the time we did that, that was when things got changed, and we had new people coming onto the commission, and the committees were reorganized, and I think that kind of issue fell through the crack for the Finance Committee. So I did a report on it, what I found, and by calling a good number of the county's treasurers to find out what is your rate, how is it being charged, how is it being determined, and there's no, the policy that we send out in February when we ask the boards to do their budget is not really valid, because it gives you a totally erroneous picture of what the true cost to those counties that are actually charging the cabs. I would say the majority of counties are not charging onto the cabs. And so when you put a line item for workman's comp, it's almost meaningless.
Okay. Thanks, Gil.
Glenn Copeland, Washoe County Advisory Board. I'll just be real brief. I don't want to talk about the numbers because Rick pretty much covered that. But like you said, Mr. Lent, you were the secretary once. I've been the secretary before. And when you have a meeting go 4 hours long with a tape recorder and trying to get the right wording on the tape recorder, it is very difficult to do. I mean, when I was I don't know if I was appointed or elected, but when I signed up to be the secretary, I think the first thing I did was look at
a meeting.
The first thing I did was look at Robert and asked him if he had a full slate for the whole year that he was not going to be gone. But having said that, with participation, our board is very, very engaged in the Wildlife Commission. Not only do we send someone to a meeting every year, you usually see a different person from our board here every meeting. Now we've asked for people to be liaisons to the committees, and mine happens to be the Wildlife Management Committee that I've been to a couple meetings now. And, you know, it takes time to do these. I mean, I own a business, I run a business, and for me to you know, have a meeting, let's say it's outside of town, I'm by phone, so it's 3 hours by phone. I have to advise my staff to, you know, my door's closed, I'm going to be on the phone for 3 hours. You know, that takes a lot of time away from what I can be doing. Coming in here on a Friday as the appointee to this commission, I mean, it's an all-day thing. I bring in a part-time person that works part-time for me to come in and cover Friday to make sure that my business is covered. That's a big expense. To come in here on Saturday away from my family is priceless. So we're really engaged, and I think that, you know, that's what we signed up to do. So I would ask this committee to approve our requested budget for the full amount so that we can stay engaged. Thank you.
Ben, you know, I agree with you on everything, and I think it's great that you guys alternate people to come, because I think everyone on the board, the county advisory board, should have an advantage to come and speak before the commission for the experience and to rotate it, and I know your board does, and I think that gives everybody on the board experience, and even Elko, you know, if you rotated and came to more meetings, you'd be real knowledgeable of what we do here and the input we need from you, and so it's great that you should make every member of your board participate. And so you got 3, 4, 5 people experience, because sometimes what we do here, you get back to your board, it really doesn't tell the real picture. So it's good to see all you guys come rotate and come up there. And it is a lot of dedication to come to the committees and in the middle of the week, and then to come to the weekend. And, you know, that's why we get paid these high bucks for doing this, you know. But we appreciate what you're doing. Thanks.
And Mr. Chairman Lent, and I appreciate when the commissioners come to our meetings too. I thank you for coming to our last meeting we had, and before that, Commissioner Capiro was coming to our meetings, and that really is helpful for us to understand what's going on. It really is. You just to really stay engaged like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one clarifying question, just since you started with me?
Real quick, just for a minute, because I'm going to take a break.
Yeah, that's why we're taking a break.
I know. For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County. You started this with a concern with Clark counties having a county employee doing recording. I've listened to the other CABs now carefully, and several of them, and Rick Smith got up and talked about spend on average a process that you started many years ago, $1,500 to $2,000 a year on a private individual. Clark County was asking to be reimbursed $2,700, and that has been something that you talked about in all the options. That was zeroed off of Clark County, but I'm not sure that was the recording budget for other counties were recorded for their private individuals, and I would ask for consideration that some, if not all of that recording budget that we asked for Clark County be considered by the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break before we bring it back to the committee.